Hey, fans of the Chalk Talk. I am here with one of my favorite guys from the startup ecosystem, Mr. Brian Smith. Brian and I met when he was in the throes of launching Red Crow, a crowdsourced funding platform, with his bandmate, Jerry Harrison, a name you might be familiar with. Jerry was the lead player in guitar and keyboards with Talking Heads. Phenomenal guy, and Brian hooked up with him from an investment background and created Red Crow, which was like the healthcare go-to source for people who were trying to get their startups funded. And along that way, Brian, I guess you stumbled on this challenge of figuring out how to really communicate well with the whole fundraising effort. Like, how do I raise money? How do I manage this process of my communications with investors, the updating process? How do I break through the noise of emails and videos? And I think that's why I grabbed you to say, hey, let's have a conversation, talk about where we're at with that today. And with that long-winded friggin' introduction, welcome to Chalk Talk, my friend.
Well, thanks, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I've been following your endeavor into Chalk Talk and the different episodes that you've had. So it's really cool for me to finally be here as your guest. But yeah, Keith, there's been a journey to get to part of what we're going to talk about today, which is the main stage. When Jerry and I started Red Crow back in 2016, crowdfunding was very new, and especially crowdfunding for equity as opposed to donation. And there's a whole history of how Jerry and I got there. And, maybe that's for another podcast and we'll have Jerry on to talk about that journey. But one of the things that we did with Red Crow that was very unique is we kept it specific to one vertical, and that vertical was healthcare. A lot of the crowdfunding platforms at the time were servicing everything and all kinds of, and many of them are still doing it today, but all kinds of industries. What we wanted to do was create a ecosystem specific to one vertical. And so we did that with healthcare. But along the way, Keith, we had a lot of healthcare companies that came to us and said, look, we love the way you present companies, but we're not ready to do a crowdfunding campaign. We don't want to do a public campaign where we're casting this wide net to accredited and non-accredited investors. And at the same time, we had other companies coming to us outside of healthcare wondering if we were doing other verticals, because again, they love the way that we presented companies on Red Crow. And so during this time, Aislinn Harrison got very involved with Red Crow. She was there from the very beginning. And her and I started talking about, is there anything we can start to create a new tool for companies that are outside of healthcare that want to present their investment, or for companies that are healthcare, but they don't want to do crowdfunding, but they want to use a similar tool? What do we have for them? And so what we created was this software that we say is really for storytelling and for companies to be able to not only present what they are looking to raise money for, but to track the investor behavior. What are they looking at? Who's coming in? And offer something much more dynamic than a pitch deck.
Wow, that's a great setup, Brian, because here's my base understanding. 80% plus of the startup world that's going out for seed or A or around their funding has a spreadsheet of all the investors that they're going to reach out to, and they keep updating that. And then they send out an email to lists, and then they try to mark that spreadsheet up with how I'm following up. And then they send emails and decks and executive summaries, and it's all a bit of catch as catch can. Like, am I reminding to send this guy the right updates? But but so that's one challenge that I think you're addressing. And then the other challenge is, how do I just separate myself, wheat from chaff kind of thing? Because a pitch deck is only a couple PowerPoint slides. And is that really going to enable me to tell who I am and how I'm different and why I'm the guy you need to invest in? Does a pitch deck, and the beauty of PowerPoint is many things, but one thing it doesn't do is communicate emotion and personality and some of those elements, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I've been there, Keith. That's the whole thing.
Right.
because I've lived this. I
Yeah.
lived it for 5+ years with Red Crow, constantly fundraising. And I also lived it prior, with some companies I helped raise in a business development role, helped raise capital for. And it's not easy. I know it's not easy, but it's also one of the most, amazing times when you can say, someone's investing in my company. They believe in me. And the challenge is telling your story. And Keith, you're right. You're right. The pitch deck doesn't do it. TechCrunch and PitchBook have statistics around how often the pitch deck is viewed and for how long. And it's anywhere from less than 2 minutes to 30 seconds.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Isn't
And
that crazy?
well, it's
Oh,
crazy.
by the way, how about open rates on those things too?
Well, there's
Like,
that, Keith. I mean,
yeah, right.
that's a whole nother statistic. And when we built the main stage, we had it so we could see open rates and who's engaging us and how. One of the things we wanted to do was take that statistic that we learned about and go around, and especially go around to VCs and say, is this in line with what you experience? How long you're spending? And the answer was an overwhelming yes, it is. And so we considered that, obviously long before we started building the main stage. We knew this. It's why Red Crow was presented in a way where stories were being told, Keith, with video, we would take podcasts like this and put it in to the what we now call the story vault, where companies are telling their story. But Keith, it's amazing that companies will spend the money they spend to have somebody build a deck for them and spend the time that they spend sharing that deck. And
Oh,
there's a few things I want to say about it that we've also learned. Well, one, we had a VC see the main stage, and their response to us was what LinkedIn was to the resume, the main stage is to the pitch deck.
I like it.
And on
Catchy.
yeah, and on top of that, um, we've looked at so many different pitch decks, and they range from 10 pages to 30 pages and always being updated. One of the things we learned when building Red Crow too, and I bet you a lot of entrepreneurs just don't understand this, is that every time your pitch deck is updated, you need to resend that updated version to every person that has an older copy of your pitch deck. Even if you think they're not going to invest, you need to resend it to them. And that's how you stay compliant. And the thing about that, Keith, is a lot of us assume, as entrepreneurs, well, I sent my pitch deck to Keith 2 months ago. He's not interested. He's never gotten back to me. And then how many times have we heard from that individual maybe 3 months later and said, hey, Brian, I was traveling. I really love what you're doing. Look, I want to make a $50,000 investment. Well, two things we tend to do. We tend to not have sent them the most up-to-date pitch deck. And once they make that investment, we tend to not go back to them and say, oh, before you do it, you need to know how our business has changed. We're so interested in bringing that investment in, and yet the compliant thing to do is to make sure they always have the most up-to-date information.
Brian, great point. And you're right. I don't think that's widely known or considered or executed. The other point that comes to mind is that you really serve multiple masters. You need to provide this service for the investor. I mean, the VC has to love the main stage and create the flywheel just like the startup company does. They have to go, yeah, I could really use this engine, but unless you have the investor loving it, like I guess they do LinkedIn, I'm not sure. But I guess my assumption would be, wow, I'd much rather hear a video presentation of the business. I think my understanding and retention would go up quite a bit if I was able to click, watch the video presentation versus click, go through 25 slides.
Yeah, absolutely. And within the main stage, we looked at all the things too that investors eventually ask for. Like, let's connect on LinkedIn. I want to see who we know that's on LinkedIn. So within the main stage, we make sure the entire executive team and advisors are all part of the main stage story vault. They
Right.
can all be connected to LinkedIn. We have a timeline tab, so it shows the entire life of the company and the accomplishments along the way. And all of that is on the front end, Keith. But then on the back end, we have all these analytics of watching and communicating with investors and prospects. Where are they going into the front end and what are they looking at? And then, saying, okay, well, I've sent it to 5 investors. This one particular investor has spent 20 minutes looking through all of my deal docs. So maybe I need to focus my attention on that person who seems to be very, very interested, as opposed to the person that opened it, went in, watched the video, and that's all they really looked at.
Yeah.
So we have these ways of making it more efficient on where to spend time, what's working in your story vault, what's resonating. And the other thing is, Keith, we have it so the video is king. And we learned this with Red Crow, that videos, being able to tell your story was very important, especially with a crowdfunding campaign. So we have a section in the Story Vault for videos and being able to upload all kinds of content. But we made it so too that the videos are something that maybe you're updating every other week. And it might be as simple as taking your iPhone and shooting a video of yourself talking about the fundraise. And we look at it like, what better way for prospects to get to know the founders by hearing directly from them, getting
Right.
updates from them? Keith, sometimes in this world, especially when it's virtual, and if you're doing something where you're doing crowdfunding and you're casting this wide net around the globe, you don't have the luxury of sitting across from somebody. And we certainly lost that when we had our pandemic. And I think it changed forever the way we look at Zoom and videos. So having the ability to do a video where an investor, say in Montana, and you're a company in New York, can connect and can get to know each other.
I think it's so authentic. I think versus, reading something that's canned or, using a teleprompter as I've seen some do. It's just, yeah, I've been in
Yeah.
a lot of pitches myself. So this seems so easy. Why would somebody not do it?
Um, well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I feel the same way about it and why we
Yeah.
created it and why I'm so excited about it. One thing, Keith, if we think about what have been some of the challenges in getting companies to use the main stage. First off, it's a subscription model and it's a very affordable monthly subscription. But where we've seen companies sign up and stop is they don't have the content. They don't
Mhm.
have a tight story.
Right.
One thing about the main stage is that it forces you to make sure your story is compelling and tight. We have founders that don't know how to convey their message. And so we do help them. We have ways to coach. We have scripts that we can provide if you're looking for a guide on how to tell your story on a video, but also getting the content tight and being ready to push it out there.
Share.
That's a lot of fun to just watch what you're doing. And thank you for having me.
You bet. You bet.